Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I've got some leather that I received from Montana Leather. This is the Vaqueta leather, and it's a pre-dyed leather. Comes in 2 different thicknesses and 6 different colors. I'm going to be using the red and the brown today, and the project is going to be a couple of journal covers. Now, last year I think it was in the brown, I did a Bible cover, and it generates quite a few questions. There's some steps in there that I didn't really dig into. So today I'm going to cover some of those smaller parts about fitting the cover, making sure we have the right size. I'm going to do that more on this one, and I'll cover some of the other steps, but I'm not going to go into as much detail on there. I will put a link to the Bible cover that I did last year. I'll do a link on that one, and so if you want to see some of the different aspects that I don't cover in there, then I'll cover it on that one. So enough said. I appreciate you being with me in the shop today. I'll get you over here and we'll get started cutting out the pieces and figuring out the size. Okay, these 2 hides are 9 ounces. Let me check this one and see. That one's 9. I think the website says it's like 8 to 9. This one's 8. Totally fine for what I'm, and that's obviously where I gauged. It can vary throughout the hide, but that's what I'm going to be using today. So let me set these out of the way for just a minute here, and I'm going to show you some of the steps I go through on here. To get started, the first thing I need to do is I need to figure out how much leather I need to cover this, and so I can get the panel cut. The way I do that is I'll take a strip of leather that's the same thickness as the leather I'm going to use to cover it. And if I don't have one, I can cut a strip off of the existing leather, and I run that strip around the book to measure it. You can use a tape measure, but the amount of leather needed around this edge can vary some depending on the thickness of that leather. So I'm just going to do here, and I'm not going to add anything for the seam. I'm just trying to figure out how much leather to go around here. So I'll mark this. If you don't have the same thickness, I would go a little bit thicker than a little bit thinner, because the thicker it is, the more it takes. So I am 12 and 13/16. Sorry, 12 and 3/16. All right, so as you can see, I've created some marks on here, and I'm going to say this is a 1/4 inch. So that's going to be 1/8 on the outside and 1/8 on the inside, because where that leather comes together, if this is where the seam is, where it's sewn, it comes together at a point, and you can't get the book all the way into that corner. So as much as I have on the outside, I'll have on the inside. So it's 1/8 on each, that's a 1/4. And I'm going to round up a little bit, because this is, I've got it as 3/16. Let's say it's a 1/4, and then I'm going to add a 1/4 for each side, not just one. So we're adding 1/2 of an inch. So I'm going to say it's 12 and 3/4 inches. And if I just use this tape measure and measure around here, I'm 12 inches. So that proves the point that the leather takes more to go that distance, because it was 12 and 3/16. All right, so 12 and 3/4. Now going this way, I can measure that with a tape measure. Here, this book is 8 1/4 inches. In theory, that same 1/4 inch here on both sides, so 1/2 of an inch, so it'd be 8 3/4 would be enough. But my experience is that if that edge, if it's hard to get it into there, that can be a big challenge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this, I'm going to make it 9 inches. I think it's better if it's a little bit taller anyway. You know, that extra space in there will work fine. So we have 12 3/4 by, what did I just say? 8 1/4 by 9. I'm going to do 13 by 9. I know, I just rounded it up a little bit again. That's okay. What I may do is on the outside of my seam allowance, I may make that a little bit wider, and then I can trim and cut those edges together when I get it all assembled and make sure that I have plenty of room. So I'm going to cut out 2 pieces of leather, because I have 2 different colors here, that are 13 by 9. The next thing that I need to cut out is going to be the strip of leather that it attaches to the cover that makes the pocket for this to slide into. Now, if the book is pretty rigid and can't bend around very well, depending on what the cover is, you have to have more. In other words, when this leather is here and the pocket is here, if you make that pocket, let's say you made the pocket this deep, you would have to bend these completely straight back and fold that other leather and push it on there. So keep in mind that maybe some older books and Bibles, whatever it is that you're making it for, you may only want to go about this far, so that means that pocket is going to be smaller. The bigger this cover is, really, the better it holds onto this flap of leather. But this is pretty flexible, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, what is this distance here? This is 5.5 inches. I'm going to make the pocket, I'm going to make it 3 1/4. That includes the seam allowance. So 3 1/4 times the 9 inches. So I need 2 of those for each book, and then I need 1 of the outside cover for each book. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cut those pieces of leather, and then I'll come back when I've got that completed. All right, the inner pocket part of that book cover, it doesn't need to be thick leather like this. Matter of fact, I don't want it to be thick leather like that. I want something that's around, I don't know, maybe 3 ounces for a couple reasons. Let me see. I'm not sure. It may be hard to pull this through. I'm going to see if I can pull this through and split this down to about 3 ounces here. I wasn't sure I'd be able to do that. I did just recently sharpen this, so that helps. Come on, baby. By golly, I think that's going to work. That was not easy to pull. The one thing I don't like about this Heritage splitter, you have to hold this engaged. It'd be nice to be able to have both of my hands. You know, as I say that, I think what I need to do, this is my stash of boiled linseed oil, but I need to put a hook back here and maybe a rubber bungee strap on here that I can hook this and keep that engaged while I'm pulling. Let me grab the other one. And I just checked. It lost about 1/8 of an inch in width for me pulling and stretching that leather. So if you are really wanting to be exact on it, you may want to overcut it on the width and then split it. Come on. All right, let's try some aerobics here. Whew. I think that's going to work. Luckily, on the brown, I've got leather that I received from Montana Leather that is this thickness to begin with. So I only had to do that for the red. All right, I'm a glutton for punishment. I went ahead, I had scraps that were cut off from the edges of this, and I went ahead and pulled this down to that same thickness there. And let's see what I ended up with. I find sometimes, depending on the temper of the leather, it's different. That one's 3 3/4. That one's just slightly under 4. So that'll work really good for those inner pockets there. All right, so I can set the pocket parts of both of these aside. The next thing I'm going to do, both of these are going to get the same pattern. And I'll just roll this and get some of this memory out of here so I can do what I need to do. It's still fighting me a little bit. I find sometimes if you add just a little bit of moisture to it, that'll help relax that leather and get the stop. I'm going to have to add moisture when I get ready to tool it anyway, so which we'll be doing it here shortly. Okay. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is this is going to have an all over basket weave stamp like I did that book earlier this year. And I don't need to get the basket stamp all the way out. Matter of fact, I'm going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance here with stitching. So here's a 1/4 inch stitching pretty close to the edge here. So what I'm going to do is I may even go a little bit further, but I'll have a plain area as a border on here. I think I'm going to go with a 1/2 inch. I'll set my wing dividers here, 1/2 inch. And I'm just going to make a border here for me to stay within. Be careful you don't overcut these corners. That will be unattractive. You can stay back just a little bit. We can always cut into those when we get ready. Okay, so there's my border on the outside, and my pattern is going to then stay inside of that. I'm going to go ahead and cut that border on there now. And since it's a straight line, there's no reason not to use a straight edge. It's fairly thick leather, so I can get a nice relief. You could use thinner leather, but I want to tool a pretty deep pattern in there. That's why I chose this heavier or thicker leather. So I've cut my border in. The next thing I'm going to do is I liked the, you could do the pattern straight, but I thought it looked really cool at an angle. So I'm going to create that pattern at an angle. And I'm just going to use the 1 inch width of my ruler here to set the width of my pattern. Might as well make it easy on yourself. And now we're going to go the other way here. You may have noticed that when I cut, I'll start here. Go ahead and do this. And when I get to the other end, I just use this to make sure I was looking the right direction. I'm less worried about this angle being exactly 45. I want these corners to line up down here and up here. So I'm gonna just line up here, and I start here. When I drag to the bottom, I don't want to overcut into this border, so I stop before it, and then I come back here and I push back the other way so that I have a clean cut here and I'm not into this corner. I think that makes sense. And now I'm just going to go across the panel here. I'm probably off the screen. So I've been doing something that it may not have made sense. That wouldn't be unusual. But I start my cut away from me here, and I pull towards myself. And when I get down here to the end, I stop and I push back. What I'm doing is I'm stopping before I get to this border where I may nick the border. I don't want to have a cut in that border there. I want that to be clean. And then I'm just lining up across here. What I did was I made sure that I had it set at the 45. But if it's 43 or 46, I really don't care. I do want these points to match up on the edge here, though. So I'm going to finish cutting this one and the brown one. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put moisture in this. And I will come back when I'm done. On this side over here, obviously these aren't going to match up. But I'm going to continue to make sure I match here and these across here so that these are nice half squares across the top. This other side won't be, because that's depending on how long this is. I can control this side, I guess I would say. I can't control the other one. And if I have to push over, let's say I had to push over a 1/16 of an inch here, then I will have the same reveal here so that I keep these lines parallel to each other. All right, I'll be back in a little bit. I'll have moisture in the leather when I come back. So I'm just working along here on the border. This is the brown piece, obviously. The red one, I've already done the border, and I am adding more casing to the center of the red one while this one here is being tooled, and I'll explain why here in a minute. When I first started doing this pattern, I tooled the field and then did the border, and what I found was areas here that have different types of tooling coming off these lines, it was harder for me to get a straight line here. And it's still not perfect, but it's straighter when I tool that first and then I tool the infield part of it here. All right, when I tool this basket weave stamp, you need to start in one spot and work out from there. It can be a corner, it can be in the middle, wherever it is. But if you start here and then you work over here, more than likely when you meet in the middle, your pattern's going to be off. And there's a couple different ways to do this, but let me get started here. Now, I had some people criticize my tooling, and I don't think my tooling's all that great, so that's fine. But they said you start on a line and then you work your way along. What I found is that if I have my leather a little bit damper than normal and I start here in the center with this tool, that I mushroom this leather up more. That is on purpose. That's what I'm wanting to do. So I do it as such. Then I'll come around on this side of this one. Let me turn it easier for you to see. And this was laid down over here, so this one needs to be laid down over here, pushed up in the middle. And I didn't start in the middle, and I think it kind of shows it there. So I like that pucker so that when you look at, if this was an actual basket weaved, they do kind of, a lot of times, have a little bit of a curl here in the center. So now, coming off of that one, this next one is going to be rotated this way. So this one here is pushed down. Let me, let's see how, yeah, this will be the way for you to see it. I don't keep turning it normally. I'm doing that so that you can kind of see what I'm doing here. Okay. It can get real confusing. So you can do this one of two ways. You can come off this line here and tool this long line here. And all you would do is, this one is this way, right? This one would be this way then. This is where the person said I wasn't using the tool the right way. I think you use the tool, however it works for you to get the effect that you're looking for. But I'm far from a tooling expert. I can tell you some really good people out there if you want to see good tooling. You know, a lot of people know Don Gonzalez, and Don does really good tooling as well. But one of the guys I really like to see, and he doesn't put out very many videos, it seems like, anymore, and that is Bruce Cheney. And he will do a floral. I mean, don't get confused, this way, then this way. He'll do a floral, and he takes a swivel knife and just starts cutting. He doesn't lay out a flower, a vine, or anything. Pretty amazing talent, and his stuff looks just awesome. It doesn't look like it was, you know, just, some would say maybe that's haphazard way of doing it. I need to worry, I guess, more about how I can see it better instead of you guys. So I find that if I have the leather a little wetter than normal, it gives me more of a push on that, and I just happen to like that look. So I said I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on the doing part of it. I'll come back here when I have, I'll come back when I have the bevels on all of the squares before I do the next part of that. This is a Berry King textured, I think it's checkered, is maybe the way they list it there. So I'll be back here in just a little bit. All right, so I finished all the lines that I started with going this direction, and now I've rotated to work on the lines this way. I came back to my original, this is the original square, and from here I kept working the same direction across here. Now I'll come over, I'm on this next row over here. This one's this way, so I rotate it here. And there is a visual check that you can do. When I set this down here, meaning I'm pushing this square down, I look over to this line and make sure it's pushed down, and it is. This one here, this one's pushed up, and I will be pushing up. That's the easiest way for me to keep track of it. So I thought maybe I would show you that really quick here before I continue on. In this pattern, the way I do it, it moves pretty quickly. with this large Barry King stamp, it takes a limited number of strikes to do each one of these. So I get talking here, and then I make an error, and I wasn't checking myself. So I am off here. You'll see I am pushed down here, and I'm raised up over there. So I had repeated 2 squares the same way here. I was thinking about what to say instead of what to do here. So I will just come through here. It won't be as clean, but I'll stamp this the correct way, and you'll see that it's pretty well corrected there. I know it's there, and now you know it's there, but I had someone ask one time, how do you correct a mistake? Well, the best way is not to make the mistake to begin with, and if you're just focused on what you're doing instead of talking, then you won't make that mistake. It would be harder on some patterns than this one. This pattern is a lot more forgiving. But I had stopped looking over here and checking myself like I was talking about. And I paid the penalty there. But by the time I'm done with this pattern, no one will know. Well, I guess there'll be a half a dozen people that watch the video here that'll know. So I'm going to continue on. I'll be back here in just a little bit. All right, so I have got a pretty good start on this basket weave pattern here. So I finished up the bevel on each of the squares, and now I'm using this vertical line thumbprint from Barry King, and I am creating the texture of the basket weave material, which in my mind is rattan. And if you look at that material, it's got this grain running in it where it's split. Let me see here. So I start here and I work my way across here, and I'm overlapping probably 50% of the last stamp. Part of the reason why I'm doing that is the thumbprint's got a rounded end here, so I don't want to have a bunch of rounded dimples in that area. And then after I come across here, the stamp covers about 25% of this square, so it's about a 1/4 inch wide. Then I'll come back here and I'll drop in a couple of like random longer ones into the middle here, and you'll see how that finishes that up. So let me do a couple more here this way. And I don't worry about getting right here to this edge. This will help create more of that definition of that basket weave. So all I do is I go across here, and I take one side of this square all the way across on each one of these. It's easy to see now that the bevel's there, because all I'm doing is I'm mashing down this the edge of this bevel. Random is probably the hardest thing to create. So when I'm putting these, I try to get some randomness to that. All right, so once I get that side done, then I rotate it again like this. And what I end up doing is I'll do every bevel going this way across it, then I'll rotate it a 1/4 turn, I'll do every bevel going again, and it takes 4 rotations, and then you have all of those bevels set down. Now let me make a mistake here, and I'm gonna, I bruised the edge of that on purpose, but it does happen where you get that hit there. And what I do to fix that is I'll take the original bevel, and I'll just go right underneath here, and that kind of stands that back up again. The other thing that you may run into is where you can kind of see the rounded strikes from that tool, and if you have some of those that bother you, you just go through here and kind of tap those down. So once I have all these bevels down, then I'll go through with my my bevel, and I will clean up any that I find bothersome. I saw one here a second ago. Yeah, it's right there. And so I'll just clean that up a little bit. It further pushes this up if you've got that mashed down. I like it, like I say, curled up on the edge. You'll see when we get to the end how that looks. So I'm going to go ahead and finish doing that. But let me show you the next step here. We run this all together. So I really think that some decorative cuts really make a difference here. And what I do is I'll come through here and get to where you can see. And I will, once again, it's got to be random. I'll cut the bevel like that. And, you know, try to figure out how to make them random. And I drag some further across the square and some not quite so far. So I'll do every one of those squares when I'm done with the thumbprint beveling and cleaned up any areas that I find a little bothersome here with this, the bevel, to clean those up again. There's one there. And one more thing that I look at, if you get it at an angle, you see there's that line across there of shadows. You can kind of see if there's anything missed. Here's some that I haven't done yet. I left an area here while I was working on the rest of it so that we could talk about each of these steps. Once I get all of this done, finish my thumbprint bevels, and using the bevel to clean up any of them, and I'll do all my decorative cuts. I'm going to put a light coat of oil on here, and once that's dry, I'm going to put a coat of resist on there. At that time, I'll be able to see what kind of a burnish I have and whether I want to add an antique paste to here to further highlight these areas. So I'll decide that here in just a minute, and for you, it'll just be just a few moments here. All right, I realize that I didn't show you, but I covered the back of the leather with clear packing tape. I'll put this clip in the front part, but when you put it on there, I just cover the whole back with it. But when you go to remove it, I hold the leather down and I pull the tape away so that I don't deform the leather. And it helps to let the leather dry out a good part of the way before you remove that tape. So I'll remove the tape there. All right, so if you're going to leave it the flesh side as it is, then I would, you know, you can continue on. But if you want to slick this down, I would apply masking tape just where this is going to be. So I would mark here and put like 1/2 inch masking tape around here, or only cover 1/2 of an inch where you're going to be gluing it down, and then you can slick all of this leather down if you want it to be slick. It can help in putting the book in here if it's slicked down, but it also holds onto the cover better if you don't slick that down. So it's your choice what you want to do there. So I use tan coat as the resist on here, and I've decided I'm going to go ahead and use the black antiquing. It'll highlight this more, and it'll give me more definition in those decorative cuts. So in the future, I'll try to remember, but I removed it this time. I usually leave the packing tape on the back to keep it clean through this process. So I'm going to try hard to not mess up the inside of this one. And I'm just going to use black antiquing here. I find when I've got a deep pattern like this that the toothbrush works pretty good for getting it into all of those crevices. And I also end up using less of the antique paste that I might otherwise use. And then I'll just roll it around to see that I got it into all of those crevices here. All right, I think I'm about done here. I'm going to let this antiquing set up in here. It may look like I wiped a lot of it off, and I was mainly wanting to highlight those deeper areas, not worried about adding color to the face of each of these, I'll call them tiles. But I'm going to let this dry. There's quite a bit of antiquing on here. I'll let this dry for probably 6-7 hours, and then I'll come back and I'll seal this in. I'm going to use tan coat on this. I want that little bit lower luster finish on my clear. All right, so we're ready now to attach the pocket side to the book cover itself. I want to let you know now, I did not seal any of this pocket material yet. The reason why is because when I go to fit the book in the cover, I may decide to add some moisture to this to get a little stretch if I'm having a challenge fitting it in there. If it's sealed, it would be very difficult to add moisture at this point. So what I'm going to do, I made it, like I said, an inch longer here so that I could trim this to the actual size of the cover. In case I got any stretch from all that tooling and the size, I didn't want this pocket to be short. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark on this outer cover where this is going to come to. And I'm going to go ahead and trim off some of this pocket material now that I'm ready to attach it, so that I'm not trying to guess where to put the contact adhesive. So now that I know where I want to apply the contact adhesive, I'm just going to put somewhere around 1/4 of an inch wide bead of contact adhesive along this edge. And I use Weldwood contact adhesive as the adhesive I use. It works really well. Haven't had an issue with it. Yeah, it's got some smell to it. Make sure you have good ventilation. These ends, I'm gonna run slightly more than 1/4 of an inch because I still have leather I need to trim off of there. Cover itself, I'm going to do the same deal, but I got to remember my pencil mark there. If you wanted to use a lighter weight leather and line it, you could. If I was going to do that, I would probably line it before I did my tooling, because the thicker leather, I think, helps keep from having as much stretch. Okay, so I lined up and applied the pockets, and tapping this down helps make sure I have a good contact. And now I need to trim any of these areas here where it's out past there. Not much of it. That's pretty clean. A little bit here. If it's just a little bit and you're worried about nicking this, you could always sand it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this. Now, I'm going to hand stitch this. You could sew it on a sewing machine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do like hand stitching. I haven't done any in a few days. So I'm going to hand stitch this. And I have decided I'm going to just put my stitch line dead center in this 1/2 inch wide border. So I'm going to be in 1/4 of an inch. Lay my journal on here. See if I've got room, and I do. When it's closed, it's going to be right there. So it'll be fairly close on the size. If you're making the first one, make it a little bit oversized. It still works, but it's frustrating to make a project and then have it not work. The first one of these that I made, I had a lighter weight journal, and I ended up having to cut some of the cover off of the journal to get it to fit in there. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do that to somebody's book, but it was just a paper journal. Yeah, I think we're looking good. So let me get this marked. Now, I will slightly round these corners. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. They tend to kind of mash if you don't round them a little bit. So you can decide whether or not you want your corner to be rounded here with the stitching as well. I'm not going to. I'm going to make it square. This is square, so it's going to mimic off this bevel line here. So let me get this set where it may be. It needs to be over just a hair. I run it backwards, and you can see the little mark there before I cut it. Don't get too far out here to where you overcut that corner. Somebody's going to say, why didn't you just sew where the pocket is? You could do that. You'd have stitching along here. If I was going to do that, I would get a red thread so it didn't stand out so much. But with the black antiquing that I used here, I think the black thread will look nice with it, and I think it looks better to continue it all the way around. So what I'm going to do now is I'll grab my stitching chisels, and I'm just going to work my way around this. And I'm going to start... I think I'll start here. This is the front. You can see my maker's mark on the back. I'm going to start here, upper corner. And I'm going to go this way. All right, we are ready to do the sewing. Yes, I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to use black, and I'm going to use one length of thread, go all the way around. I'll start probably somewhere in this lower corner of the back. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So I need 3.5 times the length. So I'm going to use 3.5 times the length of the stitch area here. So what I did is I measured off 3.5 times that, And then I just double that back on itself. That'll take care of the top and bottom seams. There, we've got two times that, and then I'll just do the same thing here. 1, 2, 3 and a half, and I will double that back on itself as well. I guess you could measure it and then measure the thread, but this works fine. So I went ahead and I got started here. I went ahead and started on the bottom back corner, and I'm just going to go ahead and do my saddle stitching through here. Enough thread to go all the way around, and we'll finish up right here. I guess there can be a lot of debate about where to start and stop on something like this, but I think this will work fine. So I'm using Wayne's stitching horse he gave me. Thought it would give a different perspective on my stitching. And probably won't take 3.5 times the length of the thread, because this area here is 1 layer thick at about, I think I said the red was 8 ounces. So I probably could have got by with like 2 3/4 length, but I sure hate ending up with being not long enough. So it's better that it's a little bit long than on the short side. So I'll finish up this stitching, and I'll come back when we're ready for the next phase, which I think I'll do the edges next. I'm kind of anxious to fit the journal in there, make sure all my calculations work, but I'm confident that I'm close enough that I can make it work. And I want to show you a couple of tricks that I learned on fitting the book in there if the cover is a little tight for it. So stick with me. I'll be back here shortly, and we'll get ready to work on the edges. I'll go ahead and melt and push this down. Probably a 1/8 of an inch or so. I'm going to take this over and sand and true up these edges on here, and I'll probably run across this as well, clean up the little bit of antiquing that's on there. It probably doesn't need to happen, because when I'm done, I'm going to put antiquing on here to darken that up so it matches the color here. Be right back. I'll nick these corners here. That's about right, I think. And now I have to think about what size round over I want to use, because it needs to work on both parts here. I think I can get away with a number 3 here. And I'm using my Ron's number 3 edger. I'm going to go with it all the way around here on the inside too. All right, time to burnish these. Hey, I made a mistake, so I'll tell you about that. I should have burnished this edge here on both of these before I installed it. So I'm going to do that at some point here when I'm burnishing this. And I don't want to end up with staining here. It probably doesn't really matter because the journal's not going to let you see it. But all I'll do is I'll take a piece of paper and I'll slide it underneath of there while I'm doing my burnish so I don't put marks on the flesh side here. And when I seal this, I'll do that same paper in there. But let's get some water and I'll get this burnished. You don't need to see that. I'll come back here when I'm done, ready for the next step. All right. I've got a burnish on it. I haven't touched up my color on the edges yet. I'm going to do that. I'm waiting for this water to dry, but I'm so anxious. I want to see if this is going to fit. And so let's go at it here and see what's going to happen. I'm not hating it, that's for sure. Well, let me get a better view here. I tell you what, like I said, I'm not hating it. I think it looks pretty good. But let's talk a little bit about fitting the book in here. This journal went in there pretty easy. I've got plenty of room. This lighter weight leather, you can see it's domed up a little bit there. It's pushed right up into that area, which is where I want it to be. But let's talk about this if it didn't want to fit right, because I had one of my viewers reach out to me and he was having problems with it. And I was trying to help him. Probably should have just called him, but I was in a spot where it had been difficult to have a phone call, and he was having challenges and didn't want to fit in there very well. So this edge here, I think it's important to leave plenty of room here, because if you get this much tighter than what it is, you have a lot of friction trying to push that in there, and you may end up damaging the book trying to push it in. So if it was not going in there very well, here's what I would have done. Let's take this off of here and I'll show you what I would do in that case. So it fits nicely. I've made them before where it was a challenge. I told you on one I trimmed the cover. It was just a paper journal. We just had a heavyweight paper on the outside, so it was easy enough to trim. But if it was too tight to go in there, in other words, I can lay it in here and I know I've got plenty of room, but it's just too tight to get in there. What I would do is I would add moisture just to here. I would use a sponge and wet this and let it get a little bit of moisture into it. And then I would use this bone folder here and I would push into these corners here, and I would kind of roll it here, and I would work extra space in on both of these. That's if it just needs a little bit. Let's say you do that and it still doesn't go in there. Here's the next thing I would do is I would add a little bit more moisture to there, and I would take some of your scrap leather off from belt straps about the thickness of the cover on the book. So this one's not terribly thick. Let's see what the thickness is. This cover is, it looks like about 3 ounces. So what I would do is I'd probably cut some 4-ounce leather, and after I wet this, I would take that strip, say it's, let's just say it's 1 inch wide. I'd cut it to the length of the cover, and I would work it into those corners with the tool and push it in tight against that seam. I would cut a couple scraps, I'd do that there, and I would let that dry. I don't want to wet form my journal or my book in there, but a piece of leather crammed in there, maybe crammed isn't nice, but put in there tightly against that seam will let that then dry. I would let it dry with that in there. And if you're struggling some with this being too fat there, now's the time you can kind of, I'll come back here a little bit and I'll roll a little bit this way and I'll roll a little bit this way and I'll work this edge so that it gets a little bit of memory into it. But that's what I've done in the past is I've pushed leather into there and let that dry and then fit it again. Obviously, if there's not enough room with it closed here, if you do this and there's not enough room between the edge of here and that thread on these sides, it's not going to go in. It just physically can't fit. I suppose if it's a little bit, you might be able to, I've already sealed this, but you might be able to wet this seam here a little bit. You could add moisture, now I think about it, from the inside here, and you might be able to force this cover around a board or such and try to get a little bit of stretch and fitting, because you could probably, with it in here like that, there's still some gap in there. So you could wet form this spine a little bit as well. And that would help you if you want to get it to where it maybe closes better. I had that same person actually say that when they had it in here that it wanted to pop open. And it's not unusual for it to want to pop open some. Let me push it back in here. Especially in the beginning, until it's been used some. I mean, you think about, the old baseball glove. It doesn't want to close around a baseball, but you get the baseball in it and you keep working the leather, and eventually it becomes form fit to it. It's going to be the same thing with this book cover here. I think it looks pretty nice. Anyway, I think it looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to let this, I can feel moisture, I'm going to let this dry out, and I'm going to just use antiquing on this edge here. Be real careful just to get it on the edge of this, buff that off, and then I am going to go ahead and seal all of this with one more coat, the edges, this inside area. If you wanted this color to more closely match this on the outside, what you could do is put tan coat on here and then rub some of the antique on there and buff that off, and it'll get that same color. You know what, I'll just go ahead and do that just so you can see the difference there. So I'm gonna work on the brown one, bring it up with this one, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap up and get some final thoughts on the book. I appreciate you taking time to be with me in the shop. We worked on both of these. I've got them both finished, the brown and the red. I used black antique on both of those, and I think they turned out really nice. The leather, once again, is the pre-dyed leather from Montana Leather. It's the Vaqueta leather, and it comes in 6 colors. See if I can remember. Blue, turquoise, red, fuchsia, brown, and black. There, I did it. Comes in 2 different weights, a 3/4 and an 8/9, and a full size, a full side, or you can get it in project panels as well. Someone asked, why would you buy it? And it was on a video I did with black. Black's the easiest thing to dye. There's a lot of people that work in confined spaces. They're working in their apartment, places without ventilation, and they don't want the smell. So I think it's a good option for people that have, those types of challenges they're working with. So I created all of this with the Berry King swivel knife and, let me think, just 2 stamps. I used the large checkered bevel, and I think it's a number 3 thumbprint with the vertical lines on it. And I think it just turns out fabulous. I need to take time to make one for myself at some point. So I've rambled off on here long enough. So I'll wrap up there, but can you imagine you could do a whole set, 6 colors and 6 different ones. I do appreciate you taking time to be with me in the shop today. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I do hope you have a great day.